Hello and welcome to the August 14th, 2024 edition of Office Hours presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy. I'm McFew's founder and executive director, and I thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get into the questions that have been submitted from our community, I just want to tell you a bit about the center, including our mission, vision, and how you can stay connected. So the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness was founded in 2021 with a vision for all college and career school students in the state of Maryland to be able to achieve these 6 pillars of collegiate financial wellness. Those are being creditworthy, ready, resilient, empowered, successful, and thriving. And I won't belabor the fine print there. You can visit us online at mccfw.org to learn more about the mission and vision. You can also support by staying connected, joining our mailing list, or making a financial donation. And you can find those ways to support at mccfw.org/support. And one more thing before we get into the meat of office hours today, and that's that I have to issue a brief disclaimer that the information presented during today's broadcast is presented for informational purposes only. It does not constitute personal, legal, or financial advice. There are so many factors that should be considered when you are trying to determine the best strategy to deal with your student loans. You need to take a look at your loans, your household circumstances, your preferences, and every available option before you make any decisions. And it's important that as you are approaching those decisions, you consider information from reliable sources. If you have federal student loans, then studentaid.gov is the place to go first. You also want to go to your servicer's website, see what they're saying, and then I would definitely urge you to consider the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness as another one of those reliable sources to help you arrive at the decision that makes the most sense for you and your household. All right. Before we get into our first question, I just want to share a quick update because there's been a lot going on in the student loan space. First of all, on a lighter note with events, we had a bit of a longer break, and believe me, I needed it. We had our 4th annual virtual symposium on July 23rd, and that was great. We had an edition of Office Hours on July 24th, and we've had a bit of a break because of the way that the dates fell. So for this month, we have today's broadcast on the 14th, and we'll be back on August 28th for the next edition of Office Hours. In terms of student loans more broadly, we did see an end to the PSLF processing pause last month, so applications are still being processed. It looks like there are still delays, so many of you might not see up-to-date figures for your qualifying payment counts, but things are moving now. So hopefully over the next couple of weeks, you will see some traction to reflect your most recently submitted PSLF applications. On a more broad scale, we know that SAVE, Saving on a Valuable Education, that income-driven repayment plan that was introduced last year by the Biden-Harris administration, has had some court action. The last time we were together, there was a temporary stay placed on SAVE, and we were waiting for the courts to make a determination about the future of SAVE. And since our last broadcast, there has now been an injunction placed on SAVE. So right now, SAVE is temporarily blocked, and we will just keep on waiting to see what the final call is on this. The Supreme Court may get involved, but for right now, SAVE is not moving forward. So if you are enrolled in SAVE, you should have received notice that your loans have been placed into an administrative forbearance, a time during which interest will not accrue. However, credit will not be earned toward income-driven repayment cancellation nor public service loan forgiveness. We're going to talk more about what this looks like, especially for people who are on track for public service loan forgiveness a bit later. But for right now, I just wanted to urge you all to be patient. I know that all of this back and forth drama, frankly, in the courts is not conducive to wellness nor making financial plans. However, this is where we are. And this is not just affecting you. This is affecting millions of people who have been enrolled in SAVE and many more who applied for SAVE and their applications are in limbo because of what's happening in the courts. The applications for income-driven repayment and consolidation, I believe, are still down as of today while the department works to make sure that their processes are in line with current court actions. So for now, just try to be calm, make sure that you're getting your news from reliable sources. The federal government would be the first one. You can keep up with them at studentaid.gov, and we'll just wait to see what happens with SAVE permanently. And like I said, we'll get into more detail when we have a few questions about SAVE and PSLF a little bit later on. Last note before the first question, and that is regarding PSLF. Because of all the action that's been happening around SAVE, a lot of people have reached out with questions about PSLF and whether that's going to be blocked too. PSLF is still in existence, okay? Just to reiterate, PSLF is still in existence. It is not the subject of any court cases that we are aware of right now. And unlike SAVE, which was just unveiled by the Biden-Harris administration last year, PSLF has been federal law since 2007. So if anything changes, we will definitely let you know. But for those of you that are pursuing public service loan forgiveness, please know that it is still an option. PSLF is still here. You can still complete the application for it. And to our knowledge, it's not going anywhere. All right, so that does it for our update. Let's go to the first question for today's broadcast. That question is, can I do the paper form of both the IDR and consolidation application since it's not available online? This is a great question. There have been a lot of people who are looking for a way around the online pause of the IDR and consolidation applications, and the PDF application is still out there. So you could download the PDF application and fill it out and mail it in or fax it in to the servicer of your choice. However, the processing pause is affecting everyone. So let's take a look at the formal answer for this. Our recommendation here is that you take no immediate action because the pause on processing is universal, whether your application is on paper or if you attempted to do it online. Online is not an option right now. Paper is, but it'll still be met with the same response, which is it will not be moved forward. For people who are really trying to get enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan, I understand your frustration, but submitting the paper application is not going to guarantee to move things forward any faster. And we don't know when the online application is going to come back. And who knows if there would be even more confusion if you have a paper application that's out there and then you submit an online application once the online version becomes available again, and then the servicer gets two applications. I don't know how those are handled. I know that in the past, in the case of a person submitting multiple PSLF applications, once they're labeled duplicates, that usually caused a delay of a few months for that to be sorted out. So for now, we're just recommending patience, waiting to see what the department does when the IDR and consolidation applications online are restored, and then take action. I know that makes some people uncomfortable because you feel like you want to do what you want to do and you want to do it right now. Paper is the only way. But with what we know about this kind of pause in processing, submitting a paper application is not, from everything we know, it's not going to move the process forward any faster for you. And to keep up with updates, please do go to studentaid.gov and you can take a look at the SAVE Court Actions page so that you have the most up-to-date information from the source, that is Federal Student Aid, about what's going on with SAVE. All right, let's move on to our next question. Okay, this question has to do with the PSLF buyback. It says, I can't get my old tax returns. Has anyone done the buyback and know if they'd accept a tax transcript? So let's go to the answer to get a little bit more background. So this person is scheduled to reach 120 eligible payments in September. They're looking to buy back 1 year of payments dating back to the year 2011. Unfortunately, they are unable to access the paper form of their personal income taxes because they're from 2011 and they were adhering to the general rule, which is hold on to the tax returns for 7 years. And they don't have the paper version anymore. And the tax software that they were using doesn't have it anymore either. So the tax transcript is really the only option that they have. And let's go to the rest of the answer for this. The tax transcript should be accepted, and that's the tax transcript from the IRS. Tax information is required if you were not enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan before or after the months you are attempting to buy back. And if you are going to provide tax information that's requested, you should make sure to do so within a 30-day period, or else the buyback amount will be based on what your payment would have been on a 10-year standard plan. I do want to stress that this buyback is relatively new. So what we're sharing with you is, what we read is supposed to happen. When we see what does happen, we will definitely report back those experiences as well. So our recommendation here is to wait on submitting that application for the buyback until after the eligible payments have reached 120, because the buyback only becomes a viable option if the time that you're buying back would push your qualifying payments up to 120. So if you have 118 eligible payments right now, you would not be able to complete the buyback, because buying back the payments from 2011 could only get you as high as 118. For the buyback to work, the months that you're attempting to buy back have to push you to at least 120 months. So there's no rush to do this. You want to wait until you reach 120, and then you can go ahead and proceed with the buyback. I also just wanted to add a quick note to be mindful of this one-time IDR adjustment that we are waiting to see the results of. The latest news is that the IDR adjustment, the payment counts from the IDR adjustment are supposed to be received in September. That's just a few weeks away. And once you receive payment counts through the IDR adjustment, that will let you see the most accurate figures, because you should have been given credit for any periods of eligible forbearances or deferments or anything else. All of that should be updated by the time this IDR adjustment has been completed. So you will know the maximum amount of credit that you could get toward IDR cancellation and PSLF, where you, in cases where you have the corresponding qualifying employment. So hang in there. September is not far away, and we wish you the best on getting back those months from 2011. All right, let's move on to our next question. That question is, I checked FSA, that's studentaid.gov, to see my PSLF count, and the number of payments differ between my unsubsidized and subsidized loans versus my Graduate Plus loans. Can I still consolidate and bring the PSLF payment count up to the higher count? All right, so this question is a good question that a lot of people have right now, because for 2+ years, we were working with the rule that if you consolidated loans with differing amounts of repayment history, then the entire consolidation loan would be given credit for the amount of payments attached to the loan with the greatest amount of history in the portfolio. So people were able to consolidate loans from undergraduate experiences and graduate experiences that happened much later. And all of those loans were placed on the timeline of the oldest loan within the portfolio. People were getting the highest payment counts possible. Those rules expired, though, on June the 30th. So let's take a look at the official answer for this question. So in terms of whether you can consolidate, you still can. The online application is not available right now, but once it becomes available again, you can still consolidate your loans. But the payment count formula shifted after June 30th. On July 1st, the payment count will be based on a weighted average of the individual counts and balances of your original loans. So our recommendation here is that the borrower waits until they have a payment count for each individual loan, because this weighted average calculation is also new, just like the buyback. In theory, you should be able to consolidate at any time and get that weighted average worked out, once the July 1 rules kicked in. But you wouldn't really have a way to verify whether that weighted average was calculated correctly if you did not know the payment counts on the existing individual loans. Furthermore, we are coming up on this September timeframe of when the IDR adjustment is completed, and people should receive payment counts that will include periods that aren't usually counted, so eligible forbearances, deferments, and such. So in September, you should have the greatest payment count. And once you're able to observe the individual loans and their payment counts, you can calculate what the weighted average should be. So that if you do go ahead with consolidation and you receive that payment count on the consolidation loan, you can go back and check your records to verify that the weighted average calculation is correct. So again, our recommendation is that you wait until you have payment counts for each loan. After you know all of those individual payment counts, then you can make a more informed decision about consolidating. And if you choose to go through with it, you can verify whether the calculation is correct because you have all the information you need on the front end. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right, this question is about PSLF. I was just given forgiveness. Congratulations. It says my discharge date was backdated and my payment count was over 120. Nowhere does it say anything about a refund. Do I do anything or is this automatic? Well, let's take a look at the answer. First, congratulations again. But secondly, the refund policy on overpayments for PSLF depends on when the overpayments took place. If your loans were direct all along and your qualifying payment count was more than 120, then you should receive a refund for overpayment. However, if your loans were non-direct loans and you consolidated them and your qualifying payment count came back as more than 120, but none of the extra payments were made after you consolidated, then you would not get a refund. The shorter version of this is that refunds are not available for overpayment on non-direct loans. So if you had FFELP loans, Perkins loans, you consolidated them, but you never made any payments on the direct consolidation loan, then you would not be entitled to a refund because your extra payments were made when the loans were not direct. On the other hand, if you had direct loans all along and qualifying payment count was more than 120, you should be entitled to a refund. The refund process, from what we've seen thus far, works automatically. We've seen some people who, in the letter that explains their approval for PSLF, there's usually a table that lists the individual loans, the balance that was forgiven, as well as a credit amount if there was overpayment. Some people we have not seen the credit amount listed with, but others we have. So take a look at that letter. If it does not mention a refund, then perhaps you're not entitled to one. But if you know that your loans were direct all along and you overpaid, then you should receive a refund, and that process should happen automatically. One quick note about the refunds that we've observed as well. The refund for people who had multiple months that they overpaid, the refunds from what we have seen have not come in a lump sum. Some people have received paper checks. Some people have received individual direct deposits for each payment, or a combination of direct deposits and paper checks. So depending on the method that you use to make the payment, you may see varying methods of the refund for those overpayments. But if you are going to get a refund, expect it to happen automatically. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right, it says, my daughter is a recent grad school graduate with significant debt, working at a nonprofit medical facility. She submitted a SAVE application around July 1st. Should she wait to see how this plays out, or should she look for another option? Great question and common question. So let's take a look at the answer. Our recommendation has been to wait and see how things are resolved in the courts. There are other income-driven repayment plans available, and when this news with SAVE first came out, we thought pretty much like everyone else that I was speaking with that, oh, well, if you enrolled in SAVE, you can just enroll in another plan because there's nothing to stop you from shifting from one repayment plan to another. It's not something that's desirable, the bouncing between plans. However, you can do it. So we thought, well, if you're in save, go back to repay or IDR or ICR, worst case scenario for most people. However, the application online for IDR plans is not available. And the paper application is the only thing that's there, but the processing pause is affecting all applications for IDR and consolidation. So the advice that we give at this point is just stay put, because in this situation, the borrower is working toward public service loan forgiveness. The PSLF buyback presents an opportunity for this borrower at the end of this journey to 120 to come back and pay for credit for the months where the loans were placed into this administrative forbearance. Hopefully, the administrative forbearance will not be a lengthy one, but for people who are pursuing PSLF, the buyback can help them recover these months. What we don't want to see is people shifting into and out of repayment plans and perhaps just causing even more uncertainty for themselves, even more delays with their servicers attempting to figure out what their payments will be. There's just a lot of uncertainty right now, and generally it's not a good time to make major decisions, or uncertainty is not the best condition to make major decisions under. We know that a resolution will come, and once it does come, then you can make a more informed decision that is rooted, hopefully, in more stability than trying to change things while the whole income-driven repayment system is kind of, in flux. So hang in there, wait to see what the court resolution is, and it could be that nothing needs to be done. If SAVE is blocked, perhaps they'll put people back into repay, because SAVE is a revised version of repay. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but we're just erring on the side of caution here and urging people to wait and see how things are resolved in the courts before taking action. All right, let's take a look at our next question. All right, this question also has to do with public service loan forgiveness. It is it worth submitting an employment certification form now, or should I wait until September when I hit 120? Can I make my September payment on the first of the month and immediately submit my ECF? Or does the ECF need to have an employment date through the end of September? Okay, so this is a loaded question, but I think what it comes down to is we have a person who will be eligible for the approval of PSLF after their September payment, and they're trying to figure out when they should submit their next employment verification. So let's take a look at the answer, which includes a bit of background for this question. One, we already observed they're going to reach 120 qualifying payments at the end of September. Next is that their payment date. The payment is not due until the end of September, and their last employment certification was submitted in September of 2023. So September is all over this, and it's mid-August. So this person has really about 6 or maybe 7 more weeks to go until this can be over. I know that this close to the finish line, it can be so tempting to just kind of try and, rush the process by getting your employment verified every month. I've had some people who wanted to do that in the home stretch, and I've had to tell them this: you're not going to speed the process up at all by filing kind of these piecemeal employment certification forms. Just wait until you reach 120 and then complete your last employer certification form. So let's take a look at the formal answer side here for the recommendation. First is congratulations in advance, because you're just weeks away from reaching that approval milestone. Just remember that the employment certification is only valid up until the signature date from your employer. So if you complete a PSLF application to verify your employment this month, it would only get you to 119. Next month, you would have to fill out the exact same employment certification form to get to 120. So it's only going to cost you and your employer extra time to complete another form this month, because it's not going to move your application any closer toward immediate PSLF. You have to wait until you get to 120 to get PSLF. So our recommendation here is to wait until September to do two things. One is to submit your updated PSLF application, and two is to make your final payment. I'm not sure if this is still the case, but I've heard much earlier during this PSLF process that people who were making their payments early in the month and completing the employment verifications early in the month, like on the 1st or the 2nd, I'd heard that these applications were being not treated as if the whole month had been satisfied. So I think a lot of this comes down to when your most recent form was completed. I don't know if the date was September 1st of 2023 or what, but just to avoid any potential hiccups, and I say potential because I don't know if this is still the case, but to avoid any potential hiccups, I would do this around mid-month or later. If you can stretch it out and make your payment as early as possible in the month, but then submit the PSLF application with the employment verification later in the month, I would think that that could help you make certain that your payment is recognized because the payment has been made by the time that your employment has been verified for that final month. So again, I don't know if this is the case, but I would think that because you need to have 120 qualifying payments at this point, if you make the payment earlier and then submit the employment verification later, then you should not have to worry about whether you officially reach 120 during the month of September. We want you to get this as soon as possible, but we don't want you to put yourself in a situation where you fill out a form too early, and because of it being filled out too early, that month of employment isn't fully recognized. So just a bit of I don't want to call it superstition because that's not the right word, but just as you hit this home stretch, we want you to get there as quickly as possible, but also without having to fill out the form multiple times due to timing. And if you're a person who has gone through this and had a month not recognized because you didn't make the payment or submit the employment verification after the middle of the month, I don't know if this story still holds true, but we really, really like to hear from you so that we can give people updated and accurate information. All right, let's move to the next question. All right, so this question shifts gears a bit. This is from a current student. The question is, I may be overthinking, but I know for the FAFSA you need 12 or more units. I dropped a class and then added a new one, so I'm still above 12. I just wanted to make sure that that would have no adverse effect on my financial aid since the quarter hasn't started yet. Okay, so there are a couple of issues with this question. The first one is the mention of the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And I want to be clear about completing the FAFSA. You complete the FAFSA, well, if you're a current student, then you would complete it after, if you're a returning student, then you complete the FAFSA. This wouldn't be your first time. But the FAFSA is something that you complete regardless of the number of credits that you're enrolled for, because that process takes place before the actual enrollment. So don't think, well, oh, I might only take 6, or I might take as much as 15. Do I need to do the FAFSA based on that enrollment? Do the FAFSA anyway, because you might change your mind and you want to make sure that you're keeping the door to federal financial aid, state aid, and other forms of aid that are based on the information from the FAFSA. You want to make sure that you're keeping the door to that aid open. So if you plan to be enrolled at all, or you're considering being enrolled at all, complete the FAFSA. The next part of this has to do with enrollment. And it's a great question because your enrollment does affect the amount of financial aid that you can have access to. So let's take a look at the formal answer for this question. All right, in this case, there should be no adverse effects on your financial aid. You started out with 12 units or credits, you dropped a class, but you've added back at least enough to get you to that 12. I think the question said that you have more than 12 now, but either way, there should be no adverse effect on your financial aid. You should not be losing anything because of the dropping of one course and the adding of another. But please do keep in mind, financial aid can be impacted by your enrollment status, particularly whether you're enrolled as a full-time student or part-time student. There's a minimum amount of credits that you have to be enrolled in order to gain access to certain forms of aid. So if you drop down too low, you would not be eligible for financial aid. But that's something that you really need to be in touch with your school's financial aid office about if you're changing your enrollment, because the last thing you want to do is start out, let's say, with a certain number of credits, drop down to a level that's so low that it decreases your eligibility for aid, and then you have to adjust the rest of your expenses around that, because the drop from full-time to part-time can be pretty significant in terms of the level of financial aid that you're eligible for. So please make sure that if you are going to have a disruption to your enrollment, you check with your school's financial aid office to see what will happen if you drop down below a certain number of credits. And you want to make sure that you do that as soon as possible. But in this case, there should be no effect, no loss of financial aid. All right, let's move on to the next question. Okay, this question is from a freshman attending a community college this fall. It says, I was awarded the Pell Grant, but I do not want to owe money back. Would I just return that Pell Grant money, and how would I differentiate it from free money? So this is a good question here. The Pell Grant is free money. I don't like to use the word free, but it's considered gift aid, meaning that if you receive a Pell Grant, then you're not expected to repay that money because it's a grant versus a loan, which is the type of financial aid that has to be repaid. So if all you receive is a Pell Grant, you would not have to pay that money back. So let's look at the official answer for this question for more details. Pell Grants, like I said, do not need to be repaid because they are a form of gift aid. However, if you're looking over your financial aid offer and you see that you have federal direct loans, those could be subsidized or unsubsidized, or anything there that has the word loan in it, a loan must be repaid. And if you do not want to repay anything, then you should not borrow it. And the way to avoid borrowing it is when you receive your financial aid offer. When it comes to loans, you have the option to accept or decline the offer. If you do not want any debt to repay, then decline the loans. If your Pell Grant is not enough to cover your bill, and you don't want to take loans, then whatever the balance is that's left over, you would be responsible for paying that out of pocket. But if you received a Pell Grant and you are expecting to receive a refund based on that Pell Grant, that money still comes from a grant. And when money comes from a grant, that money does not have to be paid back. That's the difference between a grant and a loan. A grant is considered gift aid, whereas a loan is considered borrowed. And if something is borrowed, then you're going to have to repay it. So if you've been offered loans, just don't accept them, okay? But the Pell Grant doesn't have to be repaid. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right, this question is also from a current student. It says, I have an out-of-state driver's license, but I receive in-state tuition due to my parents. I'm filling out my FAFSA and it's asking for my state of residence. Is Georgia my state of residence, even though I have an out-of-state address? For school purposes, I use my parents' address. All right, let's take a look at the answer for this question. This can get tricky. So the question that I have for this student is, what did you do last year? Just because I'd want you to be consistent, but hopefully you were doing the right thing last year. and being consistent would also mean being right. Our recommendation is to use the state of your permanent address. If you have moved to a state just for the purpose of attending school, a school that's located in that state, that doesn't always count as officially establishing your residency within the state. Your school will have rules, usually through the office of the registrar or records and registration. they have the rules for what it takes to be determined as an in-state resident versus an out-of-state resident. And I know a lot of people who think, oh, I'll just, move there. And since I live there and I get my license switched over, that means I'm now a resident. But that's not the case for the purposes of determining your residency status within a school. For instance, here in Maryland, the University System of Maryland, the schools have policy about what it means to be in-state versus out-of-state. And the list of requirements to become an in-state or to be classified as an in-state student, I know goes well beyond getting your license switched, from the state of your permanent address. So our recommendation here is to use your permanent address and make sure that you are clear on the policies of your school for what it takes to be granted that in-state status as opposed to out-of-state status, because there is usually a big difference in the cost of tuition for in-state versus out-of-state students. All right, so I think that does it for our questions. And at this point, I do want to share a resource with Marylanders that's somewhat time sensitive, and that is the Student Loan Debt Relief Tax Credit that's available for Maryland taxpayers each year. This tax credit can provide you with a refundable tax credit that you can then use to put toward paying for your student loans. The application is available right now, and it can be found on the state's One Stop website. That's Maryland One Stop. You would log in and complete the application and make sure that you complete it by 11:59 p.m. on September the 15th. So you've got just more than 30 days to apply for this tax credit for the state of Maryland. There are some requirements for the program. I believe you have to have borrowed at least $20,000 for undergraduate and or graduate studies. And at the time that you submit your application, you need to have at least $5,000 worth of debt outstanding on those loans in order to be considered for the tax credit. The common question that we get about this tax credit is, well, how much am I going to get? I'm not sure how much it will equate to this year. I think it's based on the overall allocation of funding for the program and how many people actually apply and are approved. So I have seen it range from, I think, about $980 to $1,300. I know that it can go higher, but the amount that people actually receive is based on demand in terms of how many people apply and are approved. So if you're interested in the tax credit, please do go to the state's One Stop website. You're going to have to register if you don't have an account already, or log in to complete the application. And please don't wait till the last minute to do this application, because it does require documentation. You have to provide documentation of your student loans, and you will also have to provide transcripts from the institutions that you attended when you borrowed the student loans. The transcripts can be unofficial, so that can speed up the process for you, but this does require documentation. So you want to make sure that you get started on that application ASAP by visiting the state's One Stop website. All right, I want to get ready to close out by sharing one more resource that's available for Maryland's student loan borrowers, and that is the Office of the Student Loan Ombudsman through the state's Department of Labor. The Student Loan Ombudsman for the state of Maryland can provide you with help if you're experiencing problems with your loan servicer, including failure by the servicer to communicate with a borrower, errors in crediting principal and interest payments, misapplied payments, inaccurate interest rate calculations, billing errors, loan consolidations or modifications errors, and or inappropriate collection activity or tactics. So I highly recommend reaching out to the Student Loan Ombudsman for the state of Maryland if you have experienced these issues and you have already reached out to your servicer in good faith, attempting to resolve the issue. If you cannot get anywhere, or it just seems like things are moving perhaps at a snail's pace, engage the Student Loan Ombudsman to see if an investigation is necessary to move things forward. You can also file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau at the federal level, but just make sure that before you engage these third parties to help you, you want to make sure that you've dealt directly with your servicer in an attempt to find resolution first. All right. I think that does it for office hours. I don't see any additional questions that have come in through the comments. If you do have any questions about student loans or about the FAFSA, you can reach out to us via social media. We are at the MCCFW on Facebook, Instagram, and X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. And we also, of course, have a YouTube channel where we place these office hours videos and annotate them so you can go straight to the content that you are looking for. We have a contact form on our website as well at mccfw.org/contact. You can submit your questions there, and we might just select your question for inclusion in the next edition of Office Hours. So today is August the 14th. We will be back in 2 weeks on August 28th with our next edition of Office Hours. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, please do tag us on social media at the MCCFW. And also, you can go to our website and join our mailing list. We have a monthly newsletter that keeps people updated about what's happening at the federal level and the state level, in the world of financial aid and higher education in general. And we have updates about events that we host as well as the events that are offered through our partners. And again, you can join that newsletter by going to mccfw.org/contact. And I'm going to check one more time to see if I've got any questions. Because I think I had a text message that came through. It says, I consolidated my loans. Where would I go to get my repayment plan information? Would that be MOHELA or the Department of Education? This is a great question and a timely question because there has been a transition in the servicing platform used by all the servicers. So the traditional advice that most people were given when they were leaving school was go to your servicer for everything. If you're trying to pay your bill, go to your servicer. For repayment plans, go to your servicer. Everything was directed toward the servicer, but things have evolved. And federal student aid online at studentaid.gov has much more happening there on that website than I've ever seen, in all my years of being a student loan borrower. And now, instead of going to mohela.com, you would go to mohela.studentaid.gov because the servicing platform has been updated and you'll see more of the features from studentaid.gov there because it's a MOHELA portal hosted on studentaid.gov. So great question from this person. You will not go to mohela.com anymore. You will go to mohela.studentaid.gov. And when you log in, things are not going to look the way that they did when you were visiting mohela.com. They're going to look a bit differently, but if you're looking for information about your repayment plan, once you get past the two-step verification and you get to your dashboard, if you click view details and you take a look at your loans, you'll be able to see the repayment plan that your consolidation loan is enrolled in. You can see your servicer, obviously for this person is MOHELA, and you can see your progress toward repaying the debt. So great question. No longer mohela.com. Now it's mohela.studentaid.gov for people who have federal student loans. All right. I'm just checking to make sure I didn't get a follow-up to that text. All right. So that does it for the August 14th edition of Office Hours presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver-Kennedy. I'm the founder and executive director of the center, and I thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out. And until next time, be well.